My name is Emily Stapleton, and I'm 32 years old. On the table in front of me lay the acquisition papers. $450 million. Data Rest Technology's biggest deal to date. 8 years of my life distilled into neat columns of numbers and ink. My phone buzzed for the third time in 20 minutes. Mom. I let it ring. Across the mahogany conference table, my CEO, David Morrison, glanced up from the last page. "You need to take that, he said. Family dinner." "I told her I might not make it," I muttered. "She's been calling since noon." "Ah," he nodded in that knowing way. The dreaded obligation. I almost smiled. You have no idea. The phone buzzed again, this time a text. Important. Everyone will be there. 6 p.m. Please don't cancel again, Em. I stared at the papers, at the 16 signatures already collected, at the one blank line waiting for mine. Emily R. Auger Stapleton, chairwoman of the board, chairwoman of the show. 8 years. I'd built this company from a cramped 2-bedroom apartment in Seattle. 23 employees had become 14,000. Revenue from 0 to 2.8 billion annually. Yet at my parents' house, I was still the one who hadn't figured it out. "Go," David said, reading my face. "The papers can wait until tomorrow's board meeting." He capped his pen. "Your signature is the only one that matters. But family," he paused, "family is complicated." That was an understatement. I stood, grabbed my navy blazer from the back of the chair. "You sure?" "Emily." He gave me a half smile. "We're not losing $450 million overnight. Go eat the roast. I'll see you Thursday." "Thanks," I said, heading for the door. "Good luck," he called after me. I had a feeling I'd need it. The drive to my parents' house took 40 minutes. At 5:53 p.m., my phone buzzed again. "Mom, you're still coming, right?" I pulled into the familiar driveway at 5:58, 2 minutes early. Because, of course, even as the family disappointment, I was still punctual. The house smelled like Mom's roast as soon as I opened the door. Voices floated from the living room, louder than usual, layered over the clink of glasses. I hung my blazer on the coat rack, smoothed the front of my blouse. Old habit, like straightening my armor before walking into battle. "She's here!" Mom called from the kitchen. Her voice had that forced cheerfulness I knew too well. I stepped into the living room. Dad stood near the fireplace, one hand wrapped around a glass of red wine. Uncle Bob, Aunt Susan, 3 cousins I barely knew anymore. My brother Steve and his girlfriend Amanda perched on the sofa. All eyes turned to me. Dad smiled, the smile that never quite reached his eyes. "Everyone," he announced, voice carrying that breezy sarcasm he used when he wanted to sound affectionate but couldn't help himself. "This is my daughter." For half a second, I let myself hope. Just one word. Brilliant. Driven. Successful. The underachiever. Laughter rolled through the room. That soft, sympathetic kind. The kind reserved for the relative who never quite got it together. Uncle Bob chuckled, beer in hand. "Still trying different things, huh, Em?" "It's okay," Aunt Susan added quickly, patting my arm with overdone tenderness. "Not everyone finds their path right away." My cousin Mike, who'd barely graduated high school and now ran a shaky construction business, clapped my shoulder. "Hey, no shame in it. Everyone's timeline is different." The muscles in my jaw clenched so tight it hurt. The same old script, the same role I'd been assigned years ago. I smiled anyway. "Thanks," I said, my voice flat. "Good to see everyone." Dad had already turned away, talking to Uncle Bob about the Seahawks. I stood there for a moment, jacket gone, dignity checked at the door, same as always. Dinner started at 6:30. The long dining table stretched out for 12 people, decked with Mom's best dishes. Roast beef, mashed potatoes, green beans, dinner rolls that probably took her 3 hours to make. Everyone talked over everyone. The familiar, chaotic hum of a family that loved the sound of its own stories. Dad sat at the head, naturally. "So, Steve," he said as he carved the roast, "how's the new position treating you?" Steve lit up like someone had flipped a switch. He'd been waiting for this. "Incredible, actually." He set down his fork, hands already moving as he shifted into presentation mode. "They promoted me to senior manager last month, regional sales division." "That's fantastic," Mom beamed, eyes shining. "What's the bump?" Uncle Bob asked, always about the money. $55,000, Steve said, unable to hide the pride. Base went from 140 to 195. Aunt Susan gasped, "Oh my God, that's amazing!" "That's my boy," Dad said, raising his wine glass. "To success." Glasses clinked all around the table, including mine. I thought about my morning, the $450 million acquisition, my own annual salary, My 42% equity in a company worth $2.8 billion, roughly $180 million in stock, give or take. Numbers that would have turned this table silent if they'd belonged to anyone but me. I took a sip of wine. The best part, Steve continued, momentum building, is I'll be presenting at the National Sales Conference in March. The CEO is going to be there, David Morrison himself. Amanda squeezed his hand. I'm so proud of you, babe. You should be, Dad said. That's real achievement. Building something, climbing the ladder. The roast turned to concrete in my stomach. My sister Sarah chimed in next. Her law firm, a case she'd just won, the billable hours that would make her $250,000 this year. Mike went on about his construction crews. Aunt Susan about her book club. Uncle Bob about vacation plans. 40 minutes passed. Not one person asked me a single question. During a lull, Uncle Bob speared a green bean and glanced my way. So, Em, he said, like he'd just remembered I existed. What have you been up to these days? I opened my mouth. Dad beat me to it. Same old, he said, reaching for the potatoes. Still trying different ventures, testing the waters. You know our Emily, still figuring out her thing. Uncle Bob nodded with that faux wise look. Still searching for your path. I get it. Took me until 35. Different strokes, Aunt Susan added, ever helpful. Steve caught my eye. For a moment I thought I saw something there. Not malice. Relief. Relief that he wasn't me. You'll land somewhere eventually, he said. Not everyone's cut out for the corporate grind, you know. Maybe you're more of a creative type. I cut my roast, piece by deliberate piece. The conversation flowed around me like water around a stone. I was present but irrelevant, a prop in their performance of success. 2 hours later, at 8:27, I started gathering my things. Leaving already? Mom asked, disappointed but not surprised. Early morning tomorrow, I said. Not a lie. Board meeting at 7 a.m. Of course, Dad murmured, already talking to Steve about golf. I thanked Mom for dinner. She hugged me, the same hug she'd given me since I was 12. I grabbed my blazer from the rack. The doorbell rang. Mom frowned. Who on earth? She opened the door. David Morrison stood on the porch, his suit still perfectly pressed despite the late hour, his posture carrying 2 decades of corporate gravitas. Mrs. Stapleton, he said warmly, I'm so sorry I'm late. The meeting ran longer than expected. My stomach dropped. Oh, Mom brightened instantly. No worries at all. Come in, come in. David stepped inside, taking in the crowded living room, the remnants of dinner. Then his eyes landed on me. His brows shot up. Ma'am, he blurted, louder than he meant to. I didn't realize you were... The room went quiet. Someone muted the football game without being asked. I straightened instinctively, boardroom reflexes kicking in. Hi, David, I said calmly. I was just leaving. Steve walked out of the kitchen, licking sauce off his thumb. He froze when he saw his boss. Mr. Morrison, he said, blinking. Amanda's mouth fell open. Mom looked from David to Steve to me. You two know each other? David glanced at me, confusion dawning, then back at her. Know each other? He repeated, almost laughing. She's my boss. Silence, the kind that roars in your ears. Dad walked in from the living room, frowning. What? David looked genuinely puzzled now. You didn't know? He gestured toward me, like he was presenting evidence to a jury. Your daughter is the chairwoman of the board for Data Rest Technologies. The entire company. I report directly to her. Everyone does. Steve's phone slipped from his hand and hit the hardwood with a clatter. His wineglass shook visibly. Chairwoman, he croaked. You're the chairwoman. I buttoned my blazer slowly. Yeah, I said. But you never asked. Heavy, suffocating silence settled over the room like a weighted blanket. Dad's face went through 3 shades before landing on a deep red. How long? He asked, voice barely above a whisper. How long what? How long have you been... He gestured vaguely, unable to form the words. Chairwoman, 3 years. I kept my tone even. Founded the company 8 years ago. We went public 5 years back. 8 years, Mom repeated weakly, sinking into the nearest chair. And you let us, she began, then faltered. Let you what? I asked. Think I was an underachiever, I supplied, turning to Aunt Susan. That I was still searching for my path? Steve's face had gone past pale to almost translucent. Data rest, he stammered. That's a $2.8 billion company. 2.8 and rising, David said quietly, clearly wishing he was anywhere else. 14,000 employees across 6 continents, last count. And you... Steve stared at me like he'd never seen me before. You started it. In that tiny apartment on Capitol Hill I made fun of. I called it a failure. Amanda whispered something to him. He didn't react. Dad stood frozen. Uncle Bob's beer hovered halfway to his lips, forgotten. I'm sorry, David said to me, professional apology mode activated. I didn't mean to. It's fine, I cut him off gently. You didn't know. I looked around the room. At Dad's embarrassment, Mom's shock, Steve's horror, Sarah's wide eyes, the cousins who'd patted my shoulder, and the aunt who'd pity-coached my life path. Why? Mom's voice broke. Why didn't you tell us, Emily? I smiled, a small, tired thing. Because every time I tried, you cut me off, I said. You told me to wait, change the subject, made jokes. You liked me better as the underachiever. That's nuts, Dad started. Christmas 2 years ago, I went on, steady. I tried to tell you about our Series C funding. You interrupted to hear about Sarah's partnership. I'd signed an $80 million contract that morning. You gave me a $50 Amazon card and told me to buy something practical. Steve got a MacBook Pro. Mom's hand flew to her mouth. But we didn't know, Dad insisted weakly. Exactly, I said. You didn't want to know. You wanted your version of me, the one who made everyone else look better by comparison. I walked toward the door. David stepped aside automatically. Congrats on senior manager, by the way, I told Steve as I passed him. That $55,000 raise, you earned it. His face crumpled. For what it's worth, I added, opening the door. I was never the underachiever. I never was. You just never bothered to look. The cold November air hit my face like a reset button. Behind me, the house was silent. By the time I reached my car, my phone already showed 17 missed calls. I turned it off, drove 3 blocks, then caved to curiosity and turned it back on. 42 missed calls in 18 minutes. The voicemails started playing one after another, a chorus of panic and damage control. Mom sobbing, Dad swearing and stammering, Steve, voice shaking, realizing the bored he'd cursed in meetings was his own sister. I pulled into a 7-Eleven parking lot, put the car in park, and listened to my family discover who I really was. 8 years too late. I didn't go home right away. Instead, I drove aimlessly through the glowing Seattle streets until my mind stopped spinning. The adrenaline had worn off, leaving something cold and hollow in its place, a strange mixture of vindication and grief. By the time I finally reached my apartment in Belltown, it was past 10 p.m. 42nd floor, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Elliott Bay. A space my parents had never seen, never asked about, never imagined I could afford. I unlocked the door, dropped my keys onto the marble counter, and let the silence swallow me. My phone buzzed with more missed calls, but I ignored them. Instead, I poured myself 2 fingers of whiskey. I'd barely taken a sip when I heard the knock. 3 short taps. I opened the door. Marcus Chen stood there, my boyfriend, carrying 2 plastic bags of takeout and a bottle of mid-shelf bourbon. I brought pad thai, he said gently, and the good spring rolls. Didn't know if you'd eaten. I hadn't. I moved aside to let him in. He set the food on the kitchen island. I saw the posts, he admitted. Someone screenshotted Amanda's little meltdown. It's everywhere. Of course it was. Steve's girlfriend was the type to post everything from her iced latte to her emotional breakdowns. I uncapped the whiskey, took a long swallow. Marcus watched me carefully. You want to talk about it? A bitter laugh escaped me. Which part? The part where my family humiliated me again? Or the part where my CEO introduced me to them like I was a stranger with a $1 billion CV? He didn't answer, just waited with that patient look I both loved and hated. I sank onto the bar stool. Do you know what I keep thinking about? I asked softly. Graduation. Marcus set a spring roll in front of me. UW, I remember. Do you remember who didn't show up that day? I do. I graduated top of my class. I walked across that stage alone. My voice cracked, just slightly. I told them the date 6 times. Mom said they couldn't miss Steve's big presentation that day. Something about quarterly sales. Marcus's jaw tightened. They didn't deserve to be there. But I wanted them there, I whispered. Back then, I still wanted them. He didn't speak because he didn't need to. I continued, the memory of my whining like thread. When I invited them to the IPO, I said quietly, Mom told me it was the same night as Steve's awards banquet. He worked so hard for this recognition, she said, like I hadn't. You went alone. David was there. Elena was there. You flew out as a surprise. But my throat tightened. My family didn't even ask how it went. Marcus poured himself a small drink. Emily, he said softly, You built a multi-billion-dollar company from scratch. You didn't need them there. But I wanted them, I said again, and that's the part that hurts. He reached for my hand. They never saw you. Tonight they were finally forced to. I let out a shaky breath. That's what scares me, that it took public humiliation for them to look at me. The next morning, by the time I made it to the office, it was 6:55 a.m. I normally arrived early, but today, the walk from the elevator to my corner office felt heavier. My assistant, Jennifer, knocked less than 10 minutes later. There's a situation, she said carefully. Define situation. Your parents are in the lobby. I closed my eyes. Of course they are. They've been here since 8:30, she added. Security called me twice. They asked to see you. I took a deep breath. Tell them to come up in 10 minutes. Yes, ma'am. 10 minutes later, the elevator chimed and my parents stepped into my office, both looking like they hadn't slept. Mom stopped just inside the door, staring up at the glass walls, the framed patents, the city skyline spilling across the windows. You built this, she breathed. 8 years ago, I confirmed. Started with 23 employees in a co-working space, moved here 3 years back. Dad wandered to the window like he was afraid to touch anything. Data Rest Technologies, he read off the building across the street. That's your name, up there. It's the company name, I corrected. But yes. Mom sank into a leather chair. Why didn't you tell us, Emily? I leaned back in my chair, the chair I'd sat in for hundreds of decisions, negotiations, sleepless nights. Mom, I said calmly, I have tried to tell you. You weren't listening. That's not fair, Dad snapped. Thanksgiving 2 years ago, I cut in. I tried to tell you about our Series C. Dad interrupted to talk about Sarah's partnership. Uncle Bob changed the subject. I tried again. You told me to save work talk for another time. Mom flinched. Last Christmas, I continued, you gave me a $50 Amazon card. I had signed an $80 million contract that morning. Steve got a MacBook Pro. Dad's jaw tensed. We didn't know. You never asked. Silence. Not angry silence, but the kind that holds the truth so plainly it's painful. Mom wiped her eyes. We didn't know. We didn't know how big your job was. You didn't ask what my job was. My voice stayed quiet. Not once in 8 years. Dad turned red. You could have insisted, pushed harder. I met his eyes. Should I have begged to be heard? He opened his mouth, closed it. You liked the version of me who struggled, I said softly. The one who made everyone else look better. You never wanted to look past that story. Mom began crying again. Dad looked away. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel small in front of them. Just tired. Emily, Mom whispered, please, can we talk over coffee? Today? Tomorrow? I shook my head. Not today, not tomorrow. Her face crumpled. I need time, I said gently. Real time. Months. Not hours. Not guilt. Dad swallowed hard. Months? You had 8 years, I replied. I need a few months. I stood. They understood the dismissal. Mom hugged herself instead of me. Dad nodded stiffly. And then they left. Quiet, shaken, dwarfed by the office of the daughter they never saw growing. When the door closed behind them, I let out a long breath. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't the one begging to be noticed. The roles had finally shifted. I didn't even make it to my second meeting before the world imploded. At 9:42 a.m., Jennifer rushed into my office without knocking, something she never did. Emily, she said, breathless, you need to see this. My stomach dropped. What happened now? She held up her phone. A Facebook post, Amanda's profile picture, a long paragraph, too many exclamation points. I didn't have to read more than the first line. When you're bragging about your boyfriend's promotion and suddenly his underachiever sister walks in and she's the chairwoman of the entire company. I exhaled sharply. Oh, God. Jennifer swallowed. It gets worse. Of course it did. I took the phone and scrolled. Amanda had written a full play-by-play of dinner. Every detail exaggerated, dramatized, soaked in humiliation. Then she'd added screenshots. A timestamped text to her friends. OMG girl, this can't be happening. And then the kicker. We all laughed at her for years, and she's worth over $180 million. I think Steve's in shock. Honestly, we all are. I closed my eyes. You okay? Jennifer asked softly. No. Yes, I lied. You're trending on Tech Life Twitter, she added. Oh, fantastic. Every founder's dream. But I wasn't angry. Not entirely. I was something else. Something complicated. Embarrassed, exposed, and painfully unsurprised. I'd built my company quietly, privately, deliberately. I never tried to hide it, but I never demanded anyone look. Now the whole world was looking. The viral thread. Marcus texted me a link at 9:58. Babe, sit down before clicking this. I clicked. A Tech Insider account had posted a thread. The data rest underachiever story is wilder than reported. Here's what we know about Emily Stapleton, the 32-year-old tech founder who hid her success from her family. Bullet points, timelines, photos from our IPO, my patents, my early interviews, even the rental listing from my old Capitol Hill apartment. By the end of the thread, there were 20,000 likes, and the comment section was blowing up at Startup Grinder. Imagine dismissing your daughter so hard she builds a 3xE company just to have something to do. At Seattle Tech Mom Life, every family dinner is still doing the computer thing. Meanwhile, she architected half the cloud infrastructure for local hospitals. AVK Insider. She revolutionized enterprise software and they gave her $50 gift cards. I can't. I tossed my phone onto the desk and rubbed my face. This is a nightmare, I muttered. Jennifer winced sympathetically. The story has legs. Seattle Times wants a statement. No statements, I said quickly, because the story wasn't about the company, it was about me. Me and the people who never saw me. The resignation email. At 11:13 a.m. an email came in. From Steve Stapleton. Subject resignation. My pulse kicked. I opened it. Emily, I know I'm the last person you want to hear from, but I need to say this. I can't work here anymore, not after last night. Every time someone says the board, I think about how I called you a creative type who couldn't handle corporate life. Every meeting feels like pity. Every presentation feels like it only matters because you let it matter. I'm submitting my 2 weeks on Monday, but I'd like to apologize face-to-face before I go, if you let me. Steve, I stared at the screen. Steve quitting would have been easy, convenient even, but it would have also been cowardly. And I wasn't letting him run from something he needed to confront. I typed back. Steve, your resignation is denied. Not because I want to keep you here, because running away doesn't fix what's broken. Your metrics are excellent. You earned your role. I didn't give you those numbers. The data did. If you want to leave for a better job, I'll personally write your recommendation. But if you're leaving because you're embarrassed, that's on you to fix. Meet me Tuesday, 7 a.m., Espresso Vivace. We'll talk. Emily. I hit send before I could soften it. I wasn't the underachiever anymore, and I wasn't letting him pretend he was a victim of my success. Tuesday morning. Espresso Vivace. Steve arrived at 6:58. He looked wrecked. Dark circles, rumpled suit. A man who'd spent 5 days drowning in the realization that he'd never known his own sister. He sat across from me, hands wrapped around a coffee he hadn't touched. I'm sorry, he blurted. For what specifically? He flinched. All of it? That's not an answer. He swallowed. For calling you an underachiever. For patting your shoulder. For bragging about my raise. For not once asking what you do. For making you feel small. I nodded slowly. Okay, that's an apology. Now what? He stared at me helplessly. How are you so calm? Because I've had 3 years to process this, I said quietly. You've had 5 days. He let out a shaky laugh. 3 years. Steve, I said gently but firmly, I found out you worked for me 2 months after your promotion. It was anonymized in the executive review system. His head snapped up. You knew? That long ago? Yes. And you didn't say anything? What was I supposed to do? Call you and announce it? I shrugged. You never asked about my life. Why would I bring it up? His face twisted in pain. Amanda broke up with me, he admitted. I blinked. What? She said if I couldn't see my own sister, I couldn't see her either. I didn't know what to say, so I said nothing. Steve rubbed his face. People at work whisper. They point. Someone asked if I got my job because of you. What did you say? That I earned it, but... He looked up at me. I don't know if I believe it. I leaned forward. Do you want the truth? He nodded. You did earn it. I reviewed your metrics before I knew who you were. Your numbers were legitimately impressive. He exhaled like he'd been underwater. But, I added, believing in it will take time. So, are we okay? He asked quietly. Siblings again? I shook my head. Not yet. His face fell. But, I added, we can try. He nodded slowly. Fair. We finished our coffees in silence. When he stood to leave, he hesitated. For what it's worth, he said softly, I'm proud of you, truly. I swallowed hard. Thank you. He walked out. And for the first time in our lives, I believed he actually meant it. The world after. The weeks that followed felt surreal. Work continued as usual. The acquisition closed. Q4 numbers soared. Data Rest stock jumped 12%. But outside work, the world wouldn't shut up. Extended families suddenly wanted to clear the air. Cousin Mike asked if I could invest $200K in his construction company. I blocked him. Aunt Susan sent voice notes trying to justify her searching for your path comments. And then, one afternoon, I received a lunch invitation from Elena Torres, one of our board members, and a woman whose respect truly mattered to me. We met at a quiet seafood place near the water. She ordered oysters and white wine. Then she set her glass down and said without preamble, "I read the articles." I sighed. "Of course you did. Everyone did." "I wanted to tell you something," she said. "Last year's holiday party, I met your parents." I froze. "What?" "Your father was bragging about Steve's position. I asked about you. He said you were still figuring things out, that you hadn't settled on a career." My stomach twisted. "I told him I was on your board," Elena continued. "He thought I was joking." I pressed my hands together to keep them from shaking. "When I insisted," she said softly, "he looked confused. Then he changed the subject. He didn't believe me, or he didn't want to." I stared at her. "Emily," she said gently, "you don't owe them your success or your forgiveness." A breath I didn't know I'd been holding escaped me. "You owe yourself protection," she continued, "even from family, especially from family." I looked out at the water, the light shimmering on the waves. It was the first time someone said something that made the ache inside me feel less like shame and more like truth. And for the first time, I wondered if the people I desperately wanted to see me were the ones I needed to walk away from. The Monday after lunch with Elena, my phone rang during a late product review meeting. It was Marcus. I stepped out into the hallway before answering. "Everything okay?" "Your mom called me." I froze. What?" "Yeah," he sighed. "She got my number from Sarah. She wanted me to talk to you." I closed my eyes. Of course she did. "She's worried," Marcus said gently, "but she's also scrambling. Their friends have been reading every article. Your dad's golf buddies are apparently giving him hell." A humorless laugh escaped me. "So now they care, because other people know." "You already knew this," Marcus said softly, "but hearing it still hurts." It did, more than I wanted to admit. The Starbucks meeting. 6 weeks passed before I finally agreed to coffee with my parents. Not because they wore me down, because I needed closure, for myself, not for them. We chose a neutral location, a busy Starbucks in Fremont. Midday, no emotional ambushes, no family theatrics. They were already seated when I arrived. Mom twisting a napkin in her hands, Dad staring at his untouched Americano. Mom's eyes filled the moment she saw me. "Emily," she breathed, "thank you for coming." "I have 30 minutes, I said. "Let's start." Mom inhaled shakily. "We've been thinking about everything, about how we treated you." Dad cleared his throat. "We talked to a financial advisor about our retirement accounts. We can give you—" "No," I said it calmly, without malice, without room for negotiation. "I don't want your money," I continued. "I make more in a month than you've saved in your lifetime. I'm not saying that to hurt you. I'm saying it so you understand. Money isn't the problem." Mom wiped her eyes. "Then what is the problem?" "You didn't see me," I said. "Not once. Not for 8 years." Mom shook her head. "Emily, we made mistakes, but we love you." "Then why didn't you act like it?" My voice stayed level. "You skipped my graduation to attend Steve's quarterly sales presentation. You skipped my IPO to attend his awards banquet. You gave him laptops and watches while giving me $50 gift cards. You never asked how my work was going. You talked over me. Every single time." Dad bristled. "We didn't know." "Because you never asked." Shock flickered across his face. I pressed on. "Do you know how many times in 8 years you called to ask how I was doing? About my day, my work, my life?" Neither answered. "0, I said. "You called when Steve had parties, when Sarah had news. You asked me for favors, babysitting cousins, running errands. But you never asked about me." Mom looked devastated. "Emily, we didn't mean—" "Hurt me?" I finished. "I know, but impact matters more than intent." Dad rubbed his forehead like he was trying to scrub the truth off his skin. "We want to make this right. Tell us how." "You can't fix 8 years of disrespect with a cup of Starbucks coffee," I said gently. Mom cried harder. I let her. "I wasn't trying to punish them. I just needed them to feel the weight of reality." "I'm willing to try," I said finally, "but slowly. Space, boundaries, accountability, not guilt-driven apologies." Dad swallowed hard. "How much time?" "Months," I repeated. "Real months. Not waiting 3 days and showing up in my lobby." He winced. I stood. "My 30 minutes are up." Mom rose halfway from her seat, then hesitated, unsure if she was allowed to hug me. That hesitation told me everything I needed to know. "Thank you for meeting us," she whispered. I nodded. Then I walked out, leaving them sitting in a Starbucks surrounded by strangers, realizing, perhaps for the first time, that I was no longer a child who needed their approval. I left as a woman who built her own world, and they were outsiders trying to re-enter it. Aunt Linda's call. 2 weeks later, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something compelled me to answer. Emily, a woman's voice, older, familiar. Yes? This is your Aunt Linda. I froze. Dad's older sister. The quiet one. The one who rarely came to holidays. I should have called a long time ago, she said softly. I was at your graduation. My heart stopped. What? I went, she repeated. I drove down from Bellingham. I sat in the back. I watched you walk across that stage alone. I sank onto my couch. I wanted to say something to your parents, she whispered. But I was afraid to start trouble. I'm not proud of that. My throat tightened. I saw you look around for them, she continued. And when you realized they weren't coming, you kept smiling anyway. Tears slipped down my cheeks before I could stop them. I'm telling you this now, she said, because I should have told you then. I failed you, and I'm sorry. I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. You deserve better, Emily, she said. Whatever you decide about your parents, I support you, even if that decision is to walk away. The line went quiet. Thank you, I finally whispered. Goodbye, sweetheart. When she hung up, I sat staring at the city lights, thinking, everyone saw what happened to me. Everyone. And no one said a word. Until now. The invitation. Exactly 6 months after the dinner disaster, I received an email from Mom. Subject, Christmas Eve dinner, December 24th. Dear Emily, we've tried to give you space, as you asked. We'd really like you to join us for Christmas Eve dinner. No pressure, no expectations. Just a meal, a chance to be together. If you're not ready, we understand. Love, Mom. I stared at the email for days. I made a pros and cons list. Talked to Marcus, to Elena, to Jennifer. Finally, I called Steve. Should I come? I asked. Do you want to? I don't know. He inhaled. Then come. And if it feels wrong, you can leave. You're not trapped anymore. Steve, I said softly, if I come, things have to be different. They will be. No more underachiever jokes. God, no. No more dismissing my work. Never again. No more talking over me. He exhaled shakily. I'll call it out if they do, I promise. I hesitated. Okay, I whispered. I'll come. Christmas Eve, December 24th, 6:45 p.m. I sat in my car outside my parents' house, the same house where I'd been erased for years. The lights glowed warmly through the windows. Laughter drifted faintly into the cold air. My phone buzzed. A text from Steve. You coming? I typed back. In the driveway. Another buzz. Take your time, no rush. I took a breath, then another. Finally, I stepped out of the car. Steve opened the front door before I reached the porch. Hey, he said quietly. Hey. They're nervous, he admitted. Mom's been rearranging the centerpiece for 20 minutes. Dad keeps checking his watch. And you? I asked. He swallowed, terrified you'll leave, but ready to back you up if you do. I looked at him. My brother, different now, softer, trying. You look different, I said softly. Feel different, he replied. Turns out humility is a hell of a workout. I actually smiled. You ready? He asked. No, I whispered, but let's go anyway. And together we stepped inside. The living room fell silent the moment I stepped inside. Not tense, but reverent. Like the first breath before a storm, or the first breath after one. Mom stood near the mantel, twisting a small cloth napkin between her fingers. Dad hovered beside the couch, posture stiff but trying. Sarah sat near the tree, hands folded tightly in her lap. Aunt Linda offered a trembling smile when our eyes met. No cousins, no extended chaos. Just the family who mattered most, and the ones who had hurt me the deepest. Emily, Mom whispered, you came. I did. She moved like she might hug me, then stopped herself, unsure, respecting my boundary. Thank you for coming, Dad said, voice low. I nodded once. Mom exhaled shakily. Dinner's ready, if everyone wants to sit. The table that changed everything. When we stepped into the dining room, I froze. The long rectangular table, the one that always put Dad at the head, Steve nearest to him, and me closest to the kitchen door, was gone. In its place was a large circular table, borrowed from the neighbors by the look of it. A subtle shift, a radical gesture. Everyone equal, Mom said softly, glancing at me. Her voice was careful, offering, not assuming. I glanced at Steve. His eyes flicked to mine, then to the table. His idea. I took my seat between him and Sarah. Dad sat across from me, not above, not beside, not looming. Just present. It felt strange and foreign and almost, in a way, hopeful. Steve's speech. Steve stood up suddenly. My stomach dropped. Please don't. I have to, he said quietly, or I'll lose my nerve. The room stilled. He looked at me. 6 months ago, he began, I bragged about a promotion, about a raise, about being important, and all while treating you like you were less. He swallowed hard, voice thickening, and I did it without once asking about your life, or your work, or your accomplishments. Mom blinked rapidly. Dad stared at the table. I called you a creative type. I patted your shoulder. I talked over you. I joked about you searching for your path. His voice cracked. And I was wrong. He looked at me again. I'm sorry, he said, loud enough for every person to hear. Not because you're successful, not because you're rich, but because you deserve to be seen long before anyone realized what they'd missed. The words landed like stones sinking to the bottom of a lake. Heavy, final, true. Aunt Linda wiped her eyes. Sarah sniffed. One by one they followed. The apologies. Aunt Linda spoke first. Emily, she said softly, I was at your graduation. I should have stepped in. I should have told your parents what I saw, and I didn't. I'm sorry. Sarah's voice trembled. I'm sorry I made every conversation about my cases, about my promotions. I didn't mean to overshadow you. I just didn't realize I was doing exactly what everyone else did. Uncle Bob stared down at his hands. I'm sorry I compared you to my own messed up timeline. I thought I was being helpful. I wasn't. Mom exhaled shakily. I'm sorry we made you invisible. I'm sorry we didn't ask. I'm sorry we... Dad reached out and placed a hand on her arm. Then he looked at me directly. I'm sorry, he said simply, for all of it, for every joke, every dismissal, every time I interrupted you. I'm sorry I put pride and assumptions ahead of being your father. He swallowed hard. You built something extraordinary. But more than that, you became someone extraordinary. And I was too busy looking at the son I thought I understood to see the daughter right in front of me. The room held its breath. I didn't cry. Not then. I just nodded. Thank you, I said softly. All of you. Mom's voice wavered. Does this mean we're okay? I shook my head gently. It means we're trying, and that's more than we had 6 months ago. Mom's face crumpled in relief. Dinner, but different. The food tasted the same. Mom's roast, her rosemary potatoes, her green beans with a little too much pepper. But the conversation? Different. Dad asked about data rest. Actually asked. What does enterprise software architecture mean exactly? I explained. He listened. Really listened. Sarah asked about the acquisition. How do you even negotiate something that big? I walked her through due diligence. Her eyes were wide with genuine curiosity. Mom asked about my apartment. Are you dating anyone? Marcus, I said. Still. Her face brightened. Good. He cares about you. I can tell. Steve talked about his job carefully, humbly. I'm thinking about moving into product, learning the development side. You'd be good at it, I said. Your sales background gives you insight into what clients actually need. He smiled at me. A real smile. Not the condescending one, not the competitive one. A sibling smile. The first I'd seen in a long time. The porch. After dinner, Dad asked quietly, Can we talk? I hesitated, then nodded. We stepped out onto the back porch. December air bit through our jackets, the night sky heavy with clouds. We stood in silence for a moment. Then Dad spoke. I don't expect forgiveness, he said. I know I don't deserve it yet, but I need to understand why you didn't tell us. I stared out at the backyard, the rusted swing set, the garden Mom always meant to fix, but never did. Do you remember when I was 12, I asked? The science fair? Dad frowned. Barely. I built a robot, I said. 3 months of work. I coded it myself. I won first place at regionals. He blinked. Oh, you didn't come, I said. You took Steve to baseball practice instead. He flinched. And when I got home, excited, proud, wanting to show you, I swallowed. You said that's nice, and went back to the Mariners game. Dad closed his eyes. That was the first time I realized, I whispered, that my achievements only mattered if they fit your priorities. If they didn't, you didn't see them. Emily, his voice cracked. So when I founded Data Rest, when we got funding, when we went public, I didn't tell you because I already knew the answer. What answer? That you would find a way to minimize it, I said quietly. To make it about someone else, about Steve, about anything except me. Dad's shoulders shook slightly. After a long moment, he asked, Am I still that man? I hesitated. Finally, I said the only honest thing I could. I don't know yet, but you're trying not to be, and that matters. He wiped his eyes. I pretended not to notice. Leaving. By the time I checked the clock, it was after 10 p.m. I had stayed nearly 4 hours, longer than planned. Mom hugged me at the door. A real hug. Tentative. Trembling. grateful. Can we do this again? She asked. Maybe New Year's? We'll see, I said gently. I'll let you know. That's fair, she whispered. Steve walked me to my car. Thank you for coming, he said. For giving us a chance. Thank you for making it different, I replied. I meant what I said, he murmured. I'm proud of you. I always should have been. I nodded. He hesitated, then added, Oh, and I got a job offer. My stomach tightened. A competitor? Yeah, same salary, bigger title. You taking it? He shook his head. No, I realized something. I wasn't running from dad arrest. I was running from myself, from the shame. But that's mine to fix, not yours. I exhaled in relief. Plus, he added, grinning faintly, the healthcare at dad arrest is way better. I laughed. Actually laughed. For the first time that night. See you Monday, he said. See you Monday. He paused, then gave a small, respectful bow of his head. Good night, chairwoman. I rolled my eyes, but my heart warmed. As I drove away, I looked at the house in the rearview mirror. Same house, same porch, same lights. But this time, the girl who left wasn't the girl who arrived. For the first time ever, I didn't leave feeling small. I left as myself. For weeks after Christmas, life slipped into a strange new rhythm. At work, everything was steady, almost peaceful. The acquisition I'd fought for finally closed. Quarterly numbers exceeded projections. DataRest's stock hit an all-time high. Investors were thrilled, analysts impressed. But my personal life, that was where the real reconstruction was happening. Not magically, not immediately, but in slow, careful, deliberate steps. Steve 2.0. Steve and I didn't transform into perfect siblings overnight, but something inside him had shifted irreversibly. He stopped bragging, stopped performing, stopped talking over me. Instead, he started showing up to meetings prepared, asking thoughtful questions, sending articles like, Emily, this made me think of the product roadmap. What do you think? Small steps, but they were consistent. And consistency meant effort. Then, one Monday morning, he appeared at my office door holding a binder. You're early, I said. I wanted to ask for help. He held out the binder. I'm interviewing for a product manager role. I raised an eyebrow. At DataRest? Yes, I want to understand what we build, not just sell it, but PM interviews are intense. I know, I said, flipping through his case study notes. You ready for honest feedback? His shoulders tensed. Yes. Good, I said, pulling a pen from my drawer. Because this is sloppy, and this section contradicts itself, and your proposed feature set is too broad. He let out a weak laugh. Wow, okay. Just rip me apart, why don't you? I'm helping you, I said. If you want hand-holding, go talk to HR. If you want improvement, sit down. And he did, for 3 hours, taking notes, asking questions, fixing mistakes. By the end, he looked exhausted, but clearer. This is the most work I've done in months, he groaned. You're becoming a better version of yourself, I said. Growing hurts. He smiled, but there was gratitude in it this time, not competition. The promotion dinner. 2 months later, he got the job. And my family held a small dinner. Just immediate family. Nothing extravagant. Dad grilled steaks. Mom made her rosemary potatoes again. When Steve announced the promotion, he spoke differently this time. Humbly, clearly, without theatrics. I'm grateful for the opportunity, he said. It's going to be tough, but I'm ready. Then he added, looking at me, Emily helped me prepare, a lot. Dad smiled. That's what siblings do. Yeah, Steve said softly. That's what siblings do. This time, there was no resentment in his tone, no desperation to outshine anyone, no hidden competition humming beneath his words. It felt real, genuine. For the first time in years, the room didn't tilt toward Steve. It included me, evenly. The photo album. After dinner, Mom disappeared into the hallway and returned holding 2 large, dusty photo albums. I found these, she said hesitantly, from when you kids were younger. I stiffened automatically. But she opened them anyway, carefully, like handling something fragile. There were pictures I hadn't seen in years. My 3rd grade science fair, my 5th grade play, my 7th grade coding competition. In every photo, young me was smiling, beaming, holding up something I'd made. A project, an award, a certificate. And in almost every photo, someone was looking away. Dad talking to another parent. Mom fussing with Steve's jacket. Sarah adjusting her hair. I stared at a picture of me holding a blue ribbon, smiling so hard my cheeks puffed out. No one in the picture looked at me, not one adult. Mom stared at the same photo, hand pressed to her mouth. Oh my God, she whispered. Emily, we weren't even looking at you. Dad closed his eyes slowly. I've seen these photos before, Mom whispered, voice trembling. But I never saw them. It's okay, I said quietly. No, she said firmly. It's not. She wasn't crying, but the grief in her face was unmistakable. Dad looked at me. We failed you. I swallowed the lump in my throat, pain and healing tangled together like threads. You see me now, I said. But only because we were forced to look, Mom whispered. That's not the same, Dad added, voice thickening. You deserved better. I didn't disagree, but I didn't condemn them either. We can't change the past, I said gently. We can only be better now. Mom nodded, wiping her eyes. Sarah squeezed my hand. Steve offered me a small, almost shy smile. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. The article that said everything. 3 days later, Forbes published a profile. The Underachiever Who Wasn't. How Emily Stapleton quietly built a 3B company while her family looked elsewhere. I braced myself as I read it. But it was fair, balanced, respectful. They interviewed former professors, early investors, 2 board members. They outlined the IPO, the viral story, and the quiet resilience of a founder who didn't wait to be seen. The ending quote was mine. Success isn't about proving people wrong. It's about building something true. My family's recognition was never the goal, but their dismissal taught me that my value doesn't depend on who sees it. Jennifer had approved it. Elena had praised it. Marcus sent 3 heart emojis and the words, "Proud of you, Em." I hesitated only a moment before dropping it into the family group chat. No caption, no explanation. Just the link. Steve replied first. Proud of you. For real this time. Sarah, this is beautiful and painful, and I'm sorry. Mom, my daughter, I see you now. I should have seen you all along. Dad, you were never the underachiever. We were the ones who underachieved at being parents. Thank you for giving us another chance. I stared at the screen, letting the words settle. Not forgiveness, not yet, but possibility. And that was enough. 1 year later, it was Steve's 1-year anniversary in product management. We gathered again, smaller dinner, quieter, gentler. Dad cooked. Mom fussed over her place settings. After dinner, I stepped outside for air. Marcus joined me, wine glass in hand. He slipped an arm around my waist. Your family's getting there, he murmured. Slowly, I said. Slow is still progress. I leaned into him. The cold air felt crisp, almost clean. Back inside, through the window, I could see my family laughing around the small, circular table they now used for every dinner. The table wasn't perfect. The apologies weren't perfect. The healing wasn't perfect. But it was happening. Piece by piece, moment by moment, shared by all of us. Emily Stapleton was no longer the underachiever. She was no longer invisible. She was simply herself. Seen, if imperfectly, but seen. And seen by the only audience that had ever mattered, herself.